Welcome, 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 everyone. This is Donna Embry here, and I thought we would take a little bit of time together today and just journey through the history and application of bioenergetic medicine. But before we get into that, as always, you know me, I want to start by bringing us all together. Because when we look at bioenergetic medicine, you'll see this a few times today. Bioenergetic is what we are. We're biology powered by energy, right? And the thing that connects us is our hearts and minds. And so when we stop to look at what is your vision, you all have a particular reason for listening to this presentation today. What is it? What is it that motivates you to sit through something like this? Is it that you're a healer? Is it you're looking for an easier way to navigate life? Maybe you've got some patients that you lost. They dropped off. Or maybe there was a particular condition that you were working with that you just didn't seem to have the answers for. Whatever it is that brought you here, you are a bioenergetic pulsation, meaning that every moment your heart and mind are creating your reality. And so every morning when we wake up, we should rise, pee, meditate. That means as we wake up, we catch our first thought and we set our intention for the day. If we don't do that, we're going to get what we get. And if you always do what you've always done, you're going to get what you always got. So as we navigate forward today, I'm going to talk about some pretty fundamental pieces. And for many of you, it'll be review. But my question for you is, do you know how to take complex things and make them simple? If you do, then you've got a unique capacity to connect with people, because when someone gets confused, we lose them. Almost all patient compliance issues have to do with confusion. That means the individual feels like they weren't heard, weren't understood, that the process was too hard, or they were expecting something different. So it almost always comes back to your agreements. What words were spoken, what intentions were spoken, all of that. The world that we have today is largely focused on the outer appearance of things. And so is our medicine, as you will see as we move forward here. So what is your vision? Well, for me, I'll just share briefly. I see a world where hearts can rest, where we are living, breathing in alignment with our true design. So let's look at this. As you move through the process with me, I want you to remember that everything is a process. This whole world operates under rhythms and cycles. But we live in a world of quick fixes, and many people look for really fast solutions for their symptoms. And you'll see how things have changed over the last 100 years that have brought us to this point. When we look at true learning, even our educational system right now is based in sitting in classrooms, taking notes, and then regurgitating the information from our minds. But our bodies are designed to learn through experience. That's when it becomes real to us. And so think about the first time that you saw someone riding a bike. I know for me, it was my older sister, and she was riding this blue Schwinn bicycle back and forth in front of our house. And every time she rode past the house, she would stick her tongue out at me and say, I can do this and you can't. Well, there was a lot of competition in my family because there were a lot of children, and she was 11 months older than me, so I learned a lot from her. But in the observation phase after that, I wanted to learn how to do it. And so my dad taught me the basic steps. He said, you need to pedal, steer, balance, watch for cars. And in the middle of all that, I felt a little bit overwhelmed. Now, you might be able to relate to this if you've mastered any kind of skill that requires your heart. And certainly bicycle riding does. It requires our heart, mind, our full attention, a full sensory experience. Muscle testing is kind of that way too. So a lot of people, when they first start with some kind of a bioenergetic testing technique, it can feel a little bit wonky because there's a lot of things that need to be integrated for you to have a flow process with it. So during the application phase of riding the bike, I was a little bit overwhelmed, and I would practice and fall down, practice and fall down. And pretty soon it all came together. Then I was no longer thinking about all the separateness of the steps, the balancing and the pedaling and all of that. It was an integration of all that. So the learning process starts mostly from the outside in if we're learning from someone else. We'll see them do it. They'll teach us a few steps. We practice. And then once it comes together, the way that it moves through our body, the way that we present it, will be completely different. There will be the same principles at play, but our expression is unique. And when we've had our own experience, we're then in position to teach. I remember getting off the bike and telling everyone else how to do it. And isn't that the way it is when we master something? There's this release of inspiration that happens, and we feel better about ourselves. So sit back, relax as we go through the process of integrating new ideas. I want you to listen with new ears. Don't just hear with your ears. When we listen with our heart. And when we do that, it gives us the opportunity to receive a fuller experience, a more full experience. Arrogance blocks learning, and so does doubt. We often say, when you're in doubt, you're out. And in the application phase of the learning process, many people throw in the towel, and they'll make up excuses about, this just isn't me, it's too hard. But we're all designed for mastery. So stick to it, and we'll see what emerges. So today we're talking about the history and application of bioenergetic medicine. And first, let's just start with, what does bioenergetic mean? Well, I already mentioned that. It's what we are. Biology, physical substance, backed by energy. We know that cells replicate from a blueprint in the nucleus of the cell. But what activates that? So we'll look at that. But before we get into that, before we get into the energy aspect of the body, I want to just kind of look backwards at the evolution of medicine or health and healing. We can go back thousands of years and look at Oriental medicine. Amazing. How did they map the meridian system? How were they able to identify acupuncture points? They knew that the body was designed to heal itself and that all disease was a blockage in the flow system. So they looked to seek balance. And there's ancient wisdom. If you look back through any of the models of medicine, they all operate under the principle that like cures like. So with naturopathy, that's certainly the case. Naturopathy got started when there were people living in the wilderness and they didn't have access to doctors, so they used what was available. They used water, they used plants, sunshine, hot, cold, to stimulate or activate or provide the environment for the body to restore a flow state. When we look at homeopathy, homeopathy came out of the understanding Paracelsus, like cures like. Paracelsus is the father of medicine. He's recognized by Western medicine as well as Eastern medicine. And much of what he spoke about was divine law, healing principles, knowing the body healed itself, and knowing that if you used different amounts of substances in combinations, that the body would heal itself. We need the balance of fluids and minerals, and just a beautiful balance that we could outline in the Kosheng cycle from Oriental medicine. Homeopathy focuses more on small amounts. So small amounts, we know, stimulate. Homeopathy really is resonance medicine. And so when you take a little bit of homeopathy, it kicks in frequency. And from there, it activates biochemistry and restores the body's healing capacity. Naturopathy is going to use full herbs. And when you use herbs in their fullness, they're going to be tonifying, they're going to be draining. They just have wonderful nutritional components in it. Osteopathy is all about they were the lightning bone setters. And they would do these bone adjustments, knowing that just looking at the way that the body heals, we know that the gut and the spine are one. And if you adjust the spine or the bones, the current flows more fully in the body. Well, osteopathy gave birth to chiropractic. And so we have all of these different models of medicine, but right in the middle of it, throughout the ages, there has been this division between the allopaths, so that would be more of the Western model, and the natural medicine model. I believe there's a time and a place for everything. But when we look at allopathic medicine, it's more focused on identifying the problem, which we do that. It doesn't matter what the model of medicine is. We're all looking at assessing and then providing solutions, aren't we? With allopathy, there is a mindset that the body breaks. And in that, we need to step in to fix it. And sometimes we do. Like if a bone breaks or, there's a really bad car accident, we want surgery, don't we? And sometimes using the allopathic drugs short term can be very, very helpful to create a sense of ease and flow in the body. So the evolution of medicine is quite interesting, because if you understand that the main models of medicine in the U.S. before 1910, the medical colleges were opened as homeopathic colleges. Did you know that? Homeopathy is the most widely used model of medicine on the planet today, still. And the FDA was actually founded in part to regulate homeopathy. So who is this guy in the picture here? This is Abraham Flexner. And the Carnegie Association hired him to write guidelines for medical education. And he didn't have any background in medicine at all. But what he came up with was having the medical education follow the scientific method. And there were very stringent guidelines set forth. So what they did after this report was written is they went through and they looked at everything that was being taught in the US, and if it didn't line up with this model, it was tossed out the door, took the back seat. Around the same time, a little bit after that, we also had the discovery of penicillin. And when people started to take that, they got well overnight. And so the FDA started to produce more of the chemical drugs. So for the last 100 years, we've been more focused on symptoms rather than cause. We used to really, really focus on the symptom or on the underlying cause. The geriatric patients that I worked with in the 90s, many of them grew up in families knowing that symptoms were actually good. They took cod liver oil every day because of the vitamin D, and they just felt better. They knew that it was going to help with joints support. It was going to help with their brain function. They knew the benefits of eating live foods. Now, all that got lost with the chemical industry coming out. And the whole medical education in the US today is funded by the chemical drug companies. So if it's funded by the chemical drug companies, is it going to include ancient principles? A little bit here and there. But for the most part, it focuses on algorithms, teaching doctors how to give the problem a name and provide a solution. When we name something, when we use an algorithm, we're looking at a linear approach. We see the liver being separate from the kidneys. And so in that, we've stepped away from a model of wholeness. When we look at bioenergetic medicine, it bridges all models of medicine. This is why I founded the Unified Medicine Institute, because I believe that there is a time and a place for everything. Each model of medicine shines brightly in one area. When we look at bioenergetic medicine, I'm looking at encompassing all of that. But when we look at the assessment techniques, we have the ability to eavesdrop in on the communication system of the body and energetically assess the causal factors from behind the symptoms. So here, pictured here is a standard EAV device, but there's a lot of different ways to tap in to the energetic body. We just have to look at it. Look at the body with new eyes, understanding that less than 10% of the body is actually physical. Less than 10% of the body is actually physical. And so what's the rest of it? Well, it's our morphogenic field. It's our nervous system. So that wiring that moves throughout our spine and culminates in our nerve plexus centers, our hypothalamus, our pineal, our thyroid, our thymus, our pancreas, our gonads, our adrenals. These are nerve plexus centers, and just a small portion of them are inside the body. The rest of it is in the field that surrounds the body. Unfortunately, from the time that I was small, I've been able to see this. And I could see when the nervous system was out of balance, when it was shut down, when it was blocked, when the individual was out of alignment with their integrity. And when that happens, they're not able to hold the one pulsation in their body. So there's dissonance. And all disease starts here. So we're able to tap the field, the morphogenic field. Here, they're tapping through the meridian system. But we can do it through muscle testing. We can tap the nervous system there. There's morphogenic field training that we can do. Some people use pendulums. Any of our magnetic assessment techniques are tapping the energetic field as well. So this is a wonderful way to be able to get more information from the larger part of the body. And it functions under the idea of resonance medicine. So we'll look at that more closely. Anytime we are doing a bioenergetic assessment, or we are offering bioenergetic assessment in a clinical setting, we need to build a toolkit. We need tools that will unlock the heart and mind, because so many people are in trauma. Just by being born on this planet, we're in trauma. And we get a download of information that just isn't true. And we're taught to focus and function from the outside in, rather than following our heart. And there's a middle ground. We're designed to complement one another, not to compete. Competition, when it's done in complementation, is joy. The other side is we want to provide substances to unlock the tissue as well. So very well-rounded, but every model of medicine is going to look to assess the need and provide solutions. Here we do it through the energy body. So what do all healthcare practitioners have in common? It's what I just mentioned, isn't it? We're really all looking at the same beautiful design. And every single one of us, regardless of our background, education, we're all looking to get better at our assessment and our solutions. So I love to talk a little bit about the story of the 6 blind men touching the elephant. So we have a big elephant right here. I loved sharing this story with my children when they were young, because I believe at the core of all of our hearts, we all have a desire to be heard, to be seen, to be appreciated, approved of, and know that we matter. Right? Yeah. And when we look at this old tale, the story of the 6 blind men touching the elephant goes something like this. There were 6 blind men. One was touching the tail, one was touching the trunk, one was touching the ear, one was touching the foot, and they were arguing. What were they arguing about? Well, they couldn't see. So they were arguing about what it was that they were touching. But they didn't realize that their perspective was narrow, because they were focused on their little world. In the big picture, they're all different perspectives touching the same elephant. And wouldn't you say that is true about the human body? That regardless of the background, if you are operating in if you have credentials that are fragmented from the whole, let's say that you're an endocrinologist, then you're going to be largely focused on the glands, you're going to be largely focused on hormones, neurotransmitters, all of that. But in a wider view, we would also be deeply interested in the body's fat metabolism, wouldn't we? Because all hormones synthesize, they're made from cholesterol. And so liver function is really, really important. And we also know that the hormones travel through the fluids in the body and they activate processes through the cell membrane. So if the cell membrane is full of metals and chemicals, doesn't matter how many hormones you throw at someone, they're simply not going to be able to sustain health. When we look at bioenergetic medicine, we have the ability to hold the space for the individual to restore their body's healing capacity once and for all, so that there's no longer a need for long-term drugs, supplements, and therapies. Sustainable healing is part of the design of the body. So let's just look at, regardless of your background, we want to go back to the basic principles. We know the body is made up of systems, which are made up of organs. Organs are made up of tissue. Tissue is made up of cells. Cells are made up of molecules. Molecules are made up of atoms and electrons. And atoms and electrons are made up of subatomic particles. At least that's what it's seen, what we see from one school of thought. Einstein noticed that in an electron microscope, if you look for the physical substance, you'll see atoms and electrons. You'll see the spin. If you look for energy, you're going to see the wave form. The wave. So at one level, our body is all frequency. It's all waves. It's strings. It's resonance. It's notes. It's music. Now, if you've been largely focused on biochemistry, that's a little bit to wrap your head around. Our process through the International College of Bioenergetic Medicine is to help you to understand this from the level of reality. At our most elemental, we are not a chemical reaction, but an electric charge. In HeartMath, I love HeartMath Institute because they've actually started to measure the heart field. We know that the heart beat when the two cells in a mother's body, the ova and the sperm, unite. There's a tone that begins to play, and it is the electromagnetic field of the heart. It's the culmination of the mother's cell and the father's cell. And so together, that new clump of cells has its own frequency. And that is actually what is running the whole cell division, the whole creative process. And at the fourth week, the gastrula is formed, which is the gut tube that runs all the way through the body, from the mouth to the anus, with the spine laid down the back. And that gastrula is made up of germ layers, 3 different types of tissue that end up forming all the tissue in the body. And they're all formed from first the electromagnetic heart, and then the gut and the brain. So the gut and the brain, the gastrula, buds the gastrula, the spine and the gut bud the brain. But the thing running the whole process is the heart field. We are born intuitive. We are born feeling frequency, decoding frequency through our nerve plexuses. But we spend most of our life covering up our sensitivity. That is disease. All disease is a result of covering up our hearts. So I show this picture because it looks like a great big gastrula, doesn't it? And this is a picture of our morphogenic field. And it extends out. Most people's morphogenic fields are hemorrhaging light. They're leaky. They're leaking substance. They don't know where they begin and where they end. We're taught to tap into other people and read their mind and provide solutions before they ever ask for them. We're taught to talk instead of listen, So everything is ass backwards. And I saw this as a child. So I am so grateful to be living in a time today where we have the science to back up the woo-woo. So bioenergetic medicine encompasses biology and energy. There's no longer a gap between Newtonian physics and quantum physics. We now know that everything about us is gravity and electromagnetics. Those are the two forces. So the gravity grounds us in water, right? Think about our body's made up of water more than anything else. Yeah, 60, 70% water. That's gravity. And then the electromagnetic current that runs through the water is the communication. And there's an electromagnetic current that runs back through you and I. So we kind of are like cells to ourselves. And we are a big body of cells living on this planet that must communicate together in order for us to restore health and healing on this planet. So this encompasses all that we are. And look at that face. She is relaxed and wide awake. Relaxed and wide awake is a sign of a balanced autonomic nervous system. And the autonomic nervous system is what connects us to the rhythms and cycles of life. And the seat of the autonomic nervous system is in the pineal gland, interestingly enough. That is where the body takes serotonin and synthesizes it into melatonin so that we can relax and rest and repair. So all of this is very important. Dis-ease. Lack of ease, lack of flow. We know the body is a flow system. All disease is a result of a blockage in the flow system somewhere. So when we look at your assessment techniques, your assessment tools, are you focusing on a body of wholeness, or are you just looking at liver enzymes? Because if you're just looking at liver enzymes, you're missing a big part of the picture. Cell replication is a constant process. Tissue develops in cycles. Did you hear that? Everything operates under rhythms and cycles. The sun comes up, the sun sets. If we look at the autonomic nervous system, there's the rest and digest, and there's the fight or flight. And they are wheels within wheels. And this is what all of the nerve plexus centers, all of the organs and systems pulse to the rhythms and cycles. If there's dis-ease, the pulse is out of cycle. It's out of sync with the rhythms and cycles of life. And so when we look at tissue development, we know that the muscular lining of our stomach and intestines is replaced every 3 to 4 days. Isn't that fantastic? Our gums are replaced every 2 weeks. We have new liver every 5 months. A new liver every 5 months? The taste buds in our mouth are replaced every 10 days. So when I say, through the International College of BioEnergetic Medicine, our focus is to assist you to hold the space for healing, to work out in a matter of months instead of years, bioenergetic assessment is a key tool. Because if we can tap in to the cell, to the blueprint, and see what resonates there, we're going to find metals and chemicals. We're going to find all kinds of things that have been passed on generationally that the prior generations weren't able to eliminate. This is what causes genetic mutations. And so when we understand cell replication and that it operates through rhythms and cycles, we're in position to be able to first focus on the individual to see if they are moving with the rhythms and cycles of life, or do they have the pedal to the metal and they're denying the flow system of the body. Key stuff. can you see that this is helpful to present inpatient education? So every time a cell replicates, we either have a degenerative spin or we have a regeneration spin. And when we bring in homeopathy, homeopathy reminds the body to do what it already knows how to do. It provides a new blueprint. The body knows there is an invisible blueprint behind the physical blueprint. There is a divine design, a true structure of cellular health. And through bioenergetic assessment, through homeopathy, this is the level that we're tapping in. On the physical body, we're tapping into the DNA through resonance testing. And the question is, how clean is the blueprint? But before we can get into the cell to tap into the blueprint energetically, we've got to clear the water. Okay, let's just take a moment and look at energy's historical thread here. Okay, when we look at the energetic component of the body, it's actually recognized by every field of medicine. They just have different names. So think about this. Traditional or Chinese medicine, call it qi, right? And if you've studied Ayurvedic medicine, they call it prana. If you've studied naturopathy, they call it life force. If you've studied chiropractor, they call it innate. And in homeopathy, it's called the vital force. And every model of medicine knows that if we restore the force, the tissue heals itself. But the tissue can only hold the energy if the flow system is open. And we have a particular problem today. It's environmental toxins, and it's fixed belief systems that shut down our capacity to receive fully. Well, let's go into a little bit of history here. I want to just touch on a few of the pioneers that did the science, scientific provings after the Flexner Report was written. Okay, so here's some names that you might recognize. Let's just touch on a few of them. So Harold Saxton Burr, he was a professor at Yale, and he got involved in some controversial studies back in the early 20s, I think. What he started to do, the first thing he did is he created a device to measure the energy fields, and he started to measure the field between two fingers on women, and he would just measure it over a 28-day cycle. Got to the point where he could predict exactly the date that the cycle would start. And the other thing that he did was he set up an apparatus to measure the field around a tree, and he noticed that the field, there were measurable changes in the field around a tree before the weather changed. So this was groundbreaking information, and he was considered a quack because he was pushing beyond the borders of what was currently accepted. Just think about the way that the worldview works on this planet. Just think about it. There was a point in time where we thought the world was flat, right? And those people that started to bring in new insight, the pioneers in the field, they were killed for bringing new information. And so a lot of the pioneers, I mean, we are working in the field of bioenergetic medicine. We're up for scrutiny right now, aren't we? Because we're pushing beyond what the agreed mindset is around medicine right now. So the weather pattern piece is huge. And many people who are tapped into their body, if they've got a lot of fungus in their body, they can tell when the weather pattern is changing. Why would they have a lot of fungus in their body? Because fungus absorbs 4 times its weight in toxins. And most of the toxins it will absorb are going to be metal-based. And if we're looking at an energetic body, metals in the body, we're like a great big antenna. And so are we going to pick up changes in barometric pressure if we've got a lot of metals and chemicals in our body and a lot of fungus? You bet your booties we are. All right, Albert, Nobel Prize winner, 1937. What's really cool about him, he won the Nobel Prize for the discovery of vitamin C. But what was neat about him, I loved the way that he lived his life in a state of wonder. And when he was looking more and more closely at the movement of molecules, what he was seeing in the microscope just didn't line up with what was being taught in medical colleges. It just didn't explain the speed. Like, you can actually affect a molecule in one area of the body. You can put your focus on one molecule in the body and it will affect a change in a completely different area of the body. So he did a lot of really, really cool studies on just the way that molecules communicate and the way that they operate in the energy body. Robert O. Becker. This guy, he's written a couple of really, really good books on EMFs, but some of his groundbreaking research was that he designed an electrode recording device that, after many studies, showed electrical changes in the same places on everyone, which corresponds to the Chinese meridian points. So some of his work really opened up the door, and now in mainstream hospitals around the world, acupuncture is very well known. It's used in lieu of taking medications during surgery. We can just go in and stick needles into the body and avert pain during surgeries. Even the most, the ones that would really cause a lot of pain in the body. So acupuncture points and meridians are input channels for the systems that regulate tissue repair. And so when we look at that, we have the ability to access the extracellular matrix, the space between the cells. We have the ability, and that's where acupuncture is working. And so if you're an acupuncturist and you're listening to this, I'm glad you're here, because the water that we have on this planet and people's knowledge of water and drinking water every day, not so good. And if we don't have enough water in the body, then the integrins on the outside of the cell aren't going to be communicating very well. The cells communicate through frequency. Fritz Popp studied biophotons. Biophotons, light. All cells of the body emit electromagnetic waves. The slowest wave travels at the speed of light, and all of the wavelengths in between can be used by the cells to communicate with each other. Now, this is big. One could regard disease as a storage of wrong oscillations. A blockage in the flow system. So if you have a cell that has a genetic mutation because the DNA is compromised, that's what a genetic mutation is. Does that mean that we're stuck with it for life? That's not what we see clinically. Not a bit. When we look at Frolick's work, groundbreaking information. He talks about the living matrix produces laser-like oscillations that move about the organism. Each molecule, cell, and tissue, an organ has an ideal resonant frequency. So there is a frequency for healthy tissue. There's a frequency for Epstein-Barr. There's a frequency for mercury. There's a frequency for you name it. No substances on the planet have the same frequency. And what did I say about frequency earlier? Well, if we look at the molecular structure, it's the spin of the electrons in the atom. But if we look more closely at the field that creates the structure, that orchestrates the molecules, it's a wave. It's a frequency. And it can be tested. All right. So let's look at this. If we know that the body is less than 10% physical, how does the body receive the frequency? Inside out, outside in. We know that the body is a liquid crystal semiconductor with gates and channels. To get to that point, though, let's look at the cell's nervous system. This is a picture of the cytoskeleton. The cytoskeleton, the cell skeleton. It's electromagnetic. It's designed to carry frequency. When we look at epigenetics, epi above, genetics, control above genes. DNA is controlled by signals from outside of the cell, including the energetic messages emanating from our positive and negative thoughts. Did you know that there's some research being done in Russia where they take stem cells in a petri dish, stem cells that have actually already produced bone tissue, and they play a frequency that rewinds, takes the bone tissue back to stem cells. They play a different frequency, and it produces different tissue, blood. So frequency medicine is the medicine of the future. When we look at this whole structure that has been largely ignored in our body because we've been so focused on the chemical, the chemistry, the physical structure, we've been missing a huge piece. This is Bruce Lipton, and he used to teach microbiology in medical colleges until one day, staring into a petri dish, he noticed that if he introduced something toxic into the petri dish, the cells would actually shrink. They would pull inward. And if he introduced something supportive into the petri dish, the cells would expand. What does that sound like? That's the autonomic nervous system, isn't it? Rhythms and cycles. So what we now know through Bruce Lipton's research and others in the field of epigenetics is that the cell membrane is the brain of the cell, and it's made up of fats. And fats are the main communication system of the body. And our cell membrane is a liquid crystal semiconductor with gates and channels. Just think about the sodium-potassium pump. So minerals activate enzymes, but they're acting on this computer chip. Pretty amazing. So how do we access the cellular level? Let's look at some common assessment techniques. How do we access the cellular level? Let's just look at this. We have a lot of Western models for accessing the cellular level. I'm looking to bring that fragmented information together into a usable form. So when we blend the best of Western diagnostics with the best of energetic diagnostics, we get a picture of wholeness. So chemistry panels, awesome. Lab tests, awesome. Stool samples, awesome. Physical examination, awesome. What are these telling us, though? What are they showing us? In these types of panels, they're showing us the physical. They're not showing us the cause. Have you ever run a stool sample on someone that comes up clean And all of the symptoms that their body is producing are indicative of a huge imbalance in their microbiome, that they might possibly have a parasitic infestation, and yet the stool sample comes up clean. That's a head scratcher. Well, parasites can burrow deep into the tissue, deep into the cells, and we cannot find them through traditional measures very often. This is where bringing in resonance, you can actually test the frequency of parasites through the morphogenic field of the body. Physical exam. Well, if you're doing visceral manipulation and you feel the gallbladder congested, you know that that person's in danger. The gallbladder is designed to keep the fluids in the body thin and flowing. But what is causing that? Does it mean that they need a gallbladder removal? No, it doesn't. It doesn't mean that at all. It means that there's something that is blocking the flow systems of the organs, the pulsations. So let's look at health intake forms. We can get a lot about the symptom pictures there if we want to. The symptomology log. But how do we assess the underlying causal factors behind the symptoms? This is where bioenergetic medicine really shines. And I'm going to pause here and start a new session because I think I'm just about to get kicked off. Yeah, so why don't we just, we'll end here today. And I'm going to pick up in part 2. We'll actually start with this slide. So make sure that you scroll down and look for the next video recording. I want you to go ahead and answer the questions that are below this video too. And that'll put us in good standing. The next piece that I'm going to look at is what are the different types of bioenergetic testing devices. I know that you're chomping at the bit to know more about that, but it feels like we're full here. So we'll pause here for now. Thanks for your listening heart, and I hope this was helpful for you.